All of the things that didn't happen, you spoke to me now, I've still been in the army. It was a bit of a strange transition to go from a soldier to not knowing what I was going to do in this new world. Whereas you build it and they'll come. I sat there thinking, well, nothing's happening. It astounds me that the amount of organisations that spend very little or no time looking at anything that's remotely outside the organisation future. Context really matters. LinkedIn, oh God, it's so fascinating.
Do you think things like culture and mindset have become buzzwords?
Don't take it personal. How do I get these people to have a way to put their perspective forward? How do we create that shared understanding? But what the military does give you under the banner I call Mission Command as a soldier is...
Welcome to this podcast brought to you by MPA and EFN.
I'm Talitha Heaton.
And I'm Ronnie Munster.
In this series, we help business owners up and down the country navigate the sometimes perilous waters of starting their own business.
Each week, we talk to business people, learn of their successes and failures and their experiences, and most importantly, gain their shared insights into what it is to run and grow a company in challenging times.
Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today. So you are founder and director of LBI Consulting, and your tagline is Strategic Solutions for a Complex World. Could you please tell us a little bit more about what that means and how you work with businesses?
Yeah, so deal with obviously wicked and complex problems. So not necessarily things that are quite simple that you would need me to come in, but something that's really interrelated and a bit messy. That no matter what you do, even if we start to pull at some things, that's going to have a knock-on effect for something you probably didn't expect. So and that's what we mean by sort of complex. The strategic solution is I tend to only really work at the sort of strategic level. So we do a lot with futures of foresight. So we help you develop multiple futures. From there, we then look at your ecosystem, we model that, and then develop strategies to how you can actually create fit within the external environment, and then all the way to actually developing your organisation. So model your organisation and see is it viable under the changes that are going to come from the future, and also is it viable to execute strategy.
Okay, that sounds fascinating.
That's quite a long journey from where you started.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your journey, because obviously you were in the military. And to go from the military, from Sandhurst, to setting up your own business, there's a lot you must have seen on your travels that, when you started out in the army, I'm sure you didn't expect to be setting up your own business. No,
if all of the things that didn't happen, you spoke to me now, I'd still be in the army. I joined 17 years old, and I pretty much joined because there wasn't much other choices for me. I didn't do well at school. I wasn't that well educated, so the military gave me a place to have a good job and get me away and hopefully to travel. But I was always once I was in, I was like, I actually like this. I was going to tend to stay until I was, old and senile, and they had to kick me out for that reason. But unfortunately, after 18 years, I was medically discharged for post-traumatic stress disorder. So it was a bit of a strange transition to go from a soldier to not knowing what I was going to do in this new world that I hadn't really been part of since I was 17. So then think about, well, how do I set a business up? I didn't have a clue. I just sort of took each step as it came till you found things that work, some things didn't work. And then it's just emerged over time to what I do now.
That's really the interesting question. You did things at work and tried to navigate your way. Tell us a little bit about that part of the journey, because I was speaking to some founders of a new startup business only the other day, and those are the challenges they're having to deal with. You've got an idea, nice little spark, and I want to do this, but they've never ordered paper clips or a computer or set up a printer or, had a contract, all those kinds of things. So tell us a bit about those kind of challenges. What were they? How did you deal with them?
There's loads. It's very different. I didn't really know, because I've always been in the military since I was 17. When I came out, I didn't really, you said consultant, I didn't know what consultant was. And it wasn't quite traditional that a soldier would go out and do this. So in the officer world, it tend to, it's quite, and they've probably got a lot of friends that are in it anyway, so they have that network. I didn't really have that kind of network. A lot of the stuff was one thinking about, well, you know, how do you set up a business? What's the legal stuff that you need to do? I didn't have a clue. Luckily, my brother's an accountant, so that helped. He got the brains of the family. And then once you've got that sort of legal entity, it's like, well, you know, how do you even, where do you even go to find clients? And I had this bit where it was almost, I fell in this trap, I suppose. You see things on, oh, you must get a sort of LinkedIn profile, you must do that. And I sort of fell into this trap where people going, you know, just put stuff out there and, you know, it'll come. You know, old film, where is it? You build it and they'll come. And that's what I fell in the trap for. And I was sat there thinking, well, nothing's happening. So what do I need to do? Then it was like, oh, you need to go networking. So, well, okay, cool, go networking. Went networking, found out I hate it.
So what did actually work then after you figured out those things that you definitely didn't like or you definitely didn't want to do?
It was, I think it's finding the right places to be, and being clear on what you do. And also, I think being myself, because I think when I first set up, because I was trying to think what it was, I was trying to talk in ways that wasn't really me. But how I got my first contract I started off in sports first, so I worked Ross rugby team and stuff like that. How I got it was just an off chance conversation. I didn't even know who the person was, and they were just asking me about my ideas of leadership, and I was just being myself, and just as bluntly as I normally am, and it seemed to resonate for them. They brought me in, and it then made me realise that maybe I should just be just blunt as I am and direct. And I've always kept that all the way through, so I knew that worked. So I built on that, and then I think once I had that first opportunity, it then gave me the confidence to then explore and see where else there was. But I've always worked on the principle that I don't advertise. If I do a good job, then I work on the fact that the message spreads, and that gives me the onus to make sure that I actually do a job that works and gets results.
So I have a question about going back a step. Why did you choose to start your own business rather than getting a job with a company, becoming an employee in, you know, a large corporate or a small startup?
Yes, because I have people that come out now and they're like, oh, you know, set up, and I'm like, you know, it might be worthwhile going to consultancy first and learning. And I always look back and think, would this be a lot easier if I just went to a consultancy first and got to understand it, and you know, then I could build a bit more of a network. But at the time, it was context. You know, context matters, and that context, I wasn't in the state to work for someone else. I could do, you know, my plan was that if I didn't get clients by a certain point, I'd already applied to Tesco's, and I was going to, you know, stack shelves at Tesco's in the evening, because I thought that would be a good job that I can, you know, do that in the evening through the night, and then I can come back to the day and do it. And that's what I was willing to do to build the business up. But I wasn't in a position, after being 18 years in the military, and the sort of transition I went through, and the stuff I went through, you know, I had quite a serious breakdown. I didn't really feel that I wanted to be subservient to someone else, and I wanted to have my own direction, have my own freedom. And it was then also, it would give me the space to be able to manage my PTSD when I needed to, rather than have to try and work that around business.
It's interesting, because the impression we always have is that the military is very structured, it's very regimented, and the transition out of that life for soldiers can be difficult because they're used to that institutionalization. But you actively sought to break away from that and become your own boss and your own man and live your own life. Is that quite unusual for somebody who's ex-military, or have people had enough and that's what they want to do?
Less so now, I think, and I see it more. Like met now soldiers that left, and they're doing absolutely fantastic things. I think traditionally, and I don't know how much this is perceived rather than reality, but it was like, perceived that, officers go out and they go do things, and soldiers go off and do, do traditional, go be electrician, go do, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it was that sort of divide. And I think that's changing now, which is good. But for me, it was one thing, the army, it is very institutionalized. Like, I remember I needed to go get a doctor's, and I was thinking, how do you do it then? So I just Googled the first doctors and went to it, and they were, we're full. I was like, okay, so what do I do now then? I'll go to the next one. And they're all full. I only got doctors because I had the chance conversation with the MP, and he was like, all right, I'll get you a doctor's. Oh, nice one. It's how this works.
Yeah.
So there is that structure of the army that, there's a lot of things done for you. Like, you have your dentist there on camp, you've got your accommodations, you have to worry about, all that other stuff. But what the military does give you under the banner I call Mission Command as a soldier is, once you understand what it is you're there to do, it gives you the freedom to then explore, okay, that's what I want to do. How am I going to do it? And it gives you that it's ingrained in us to go, well, I know I'm doing that, and I know things are going to change, but I'm going to keep adapting until I've achieved that.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And that's what it gave me the confidence to keep adapting, trying new things. Right, that didn't work. Right, reorientate. So where am I now? Right, I'll try that. What's next? And I think that's what the army did give me.
So you've got that core foundation, solid base, and you've obviously got a mindset that allows you to be flexible and adapt and change. Because not just ex-military, but for people generally, flexibility and change is actually often a challenge. And when you're building a business, particularly if you've been going a while and the world is ever changing, and we'll come on to that a bit later on, but it's quite difficult to think, okay, that's not working. What do I do next? Because I've always done it this way and it has worked. And that's a challenging mindset. And that's something that you obviously coped with and built on, really, and built your business on as well.
Yeah. And you see it. I see it a lot of the time. People struggle with that. We talk about, how do I maintain the level of coherence? So, keeping that sort of structure, but then have the ability to adapt or absorb turbulence. And you see people where you've got to have a bit of coherence, a bit of cohesion, structure what you're trying to do, and be easy to be flexible off that. Where you see people are too rigid, and they're like, no, that's exactly how we're going to do it. And that's where they break. They can't deal with then the adaptations or changes that need to happen. They break apart. Or they're in this mindset, and you see this from definitely Silicon Valley way, where it's a bit loose and there's no structure. And it's also encouraged not to have any structure. Oh, we're flat. We're turbo cool because we're flat. And they've got no structure. So when they do try to adapt or absorb some of the turbulence, they just fall apart because there's no central cohesion. So I think what's always helped me is, and will always help organisations, is actually having, a bit of structure to be able to be adaptable from. But, you've got to be able to absorb it.
Yeah.
I guess is it key then that starts with leadership? What kind of advice do you have for businesses who are going through periods of change or facing a challenge, and they're used to doing things in a certain way?
Yeah, there's a human element, there's a structural element. That's what we tend to do, because I'm a systems thinker and a psychologist, so I get to see it from both lenses. The human element is we've got to move away from of trying to define everything too narrowly, and start to be the masters of, we call it intent. Like, what is it that we're here to achieve? Give the what, not the how, and then allow people that are closest to the problem have that freedom of action to adapt as they go along. Where you see it go wrong is leaders try to get too much into the detail, and they compress. And when they compress, they've got no flexibility. So then they just fall apart. The structural part really comes into, your primary activities, we call primary activities, the ones that give value to your organisation. You need to make them as autonomous as possible. So that they can adapt to the turbulence of the changes that happen.
So that's about building trust, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're delegating authority and trust.
Yes.
And if you don't do that, then you do everything yourself and you fall apart eventually.
Yeah,
In simplistic terms.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I advocate mission command. I think mission command is the one of, I hate to say the key thing because I'm not doing like to be reductive, but is a good thing. Mission command is essentially decentralization, and that's built on shared understanding. So we have a shared understanding of the problem, what challenges or the context we're in, mutual trust. That we can build that trust. I'm going to trust you to do that. But even with trust, there comes constraints. And there's always constraints. You have your intent and there's always constraints. What's your decision rights? What can you make decisions about? And, what are the constraints where, if you're going to go beyond those constraints, that's when we have a conversation. It's not saying you can't do it. It just means that that's there to protect you. It's there to protect the business and make sure we don't go into mass entropy, but then go, for instance, well, I've looked at the problem. These are the options. I think this is probably the best option, but I'm constrained by this. Could you remove that constraint for me and I could do this? If not, then I've got these other options. And they go, oh yeah, I can remove that constraint. But we don't have these conversations. We don't have a model to understand about constraints and freedoms. And so we lose all initiative.
And it sounds like a lot of it does come down to communication. How do you adapt that model where you have different types of people in the business? So some people who have lots of ideas and want to test the boundaries and do lots of different things, and then other people who require more management and a bit more coaching and a bit of a closer relationship.
Yeah, I suppose that's when I always say, how do you empower people? That's obviously I do it all the time. You just need to empower people. That's great, but how? There's certain conditions need to be in place. So one's intent, so the what. So this is what you're there to achieve. I don't necessarily care how you do it. It's there. Constraints. So these are constraints. So you're going to go there, we'll have a conversation. And the other one is the requisite knowledge, skills, and experience. They've got to have it. If they don't have the requisite knowledge, skills, and experience yet, then you bring in the constraints. You bring the constraints, and then it goes from like transactional to sort of coaching. So you then teach them, you mentor them, develop them. So they start to build up that knowledge and skill. And then as you start to build out or push out the constraints, then you then go back into more coaching to build that experience. So then hopefully they built that knowledge, skills, and experience that you can push out those constraints as wide as possible, and they've got maximum freedom of action.
One of the things you've said, though, that's I think really important is what is your intent? What's your objective? And where you've got it, rather than an owner-led business, but businesses which are more mature, there might be a board of directors or private shareholders. They might have different objectives. He might want to exit in 3 years. He might want to do acquisition, whatever it is. How do you bring about that harmonization of fundamentally different views of what the objective in mind is?
Yeah, that's always tough, and that's why I moved into sports. Really, because I found sports quite easy, not very complex, is it? What they're here to do. We're here to win the Premiership. It's quite. I know it's not that simple. I'm going to do it, but in businesses, it's more complex.
Yeah.
You've got purisms like, I want X, I want to do this. And this is where I go against people that go, well, your aim is to exit, and that's what you go for. No. The business is the aim of the business is to be viable. And it's about, yes, you want to exit. That's cool. That's sort of side bit. But actually, you need to concentrate on being viable. The exit comes at a point. So when you've got multiple leaders in that, and it's a real challenge around, how do I get these people to have a way to put their perspective forward, and how do we create that shared understanding that this is what we've got to go for, and try and get that. And it's hard when you've got humans, because we all perceive things in a different way, we all hear things in a different way. So there is a lot around how do we get that shared understanding, then how do I then challenge you to ensure that you're feeding that back to me, that you've understood it in the way that we anticipate it to be. And then get that very clear.
Because I'm thinking about a particular business I know. I've got keep this fairly anonymous and high level, where it's owned by two individuals and one wants new investment in the business and the other one doesn't. It's a modestly successful business. And the two owners get on very well, but they fundamentally disagree about the future.
Yes.
And those are the kinds of challenges that must be in a way meat and drink to you, but ultimately it must be very difficult to make, basically to square that circle.
Yeah. And you get it a lot with in organisations, never clear cut that, you know, one has ultimate power and one makes it easy if you just have to do one. But in those situations, how we normally deal with that is understanding about what is the so we, instead of looking at what the difference is, we always look what's the similarities.
Yeah.
What's the similarities that you're trying to get at? Then once we build on that, and we can have a sort of I hate the word consensus, but consensus enough to what we're going to do. Then it's the how that's the issue. So the what there is probably not the contention point. It's how they're going to achieve that.
Yeah.
And then we would then weight it against things. So, right, if we want to achieve that, then what are our options? And we always weight the options to be try to be objective as possible, to remove the emotion away from it, and we'll put some criteria of success to weight the different options. So if we're going to go investing, so we'll choose options. So normally when we look at a strategy, we use stuff like value, options, risk, stretch, or simulation, and likeliness. So would this give us value? Or what value would it give us? What's the risk of doing it and not doing it? Options, if we went down this way, what options would that give us, or would it give us no options? Stretch, could we do that? And that'd be a good one with the funding. If we got funding, could we actually handle that? Would that be too much involvement for us? And then likeness, if we went down this way, would we like what we become?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably another key one as well, because if they're getting funding, that means they're probably going to bring third parties into it, private equity or something like that, and then that could change dynamic.
That's the argument.
Yeah,
But yeah, I won't discuss that now.
yeah. But I think having that, trying to move the objectivity away from the problem and try to find some sort of criteria of success to measure it from, can have a better conversation than just sort of two opposing views.
Yeah.
It sounds like that's where you bring a lot of value in being an external party, because you don't have an emotional tie to the decisions being made, where founders are very emotionally driven.
Very emotionally driven.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see businesses making as they are trying to grow?
Oh, that's good. That's a really good question. It's the biggest mistake. I think I've definitely seen it more now that they neglect structure over what's prevailing now is around just mindset. And they just focus on that, and it's about just culture. You know, we don't need a strategy, we just need mindset and a culture, and we'll be fine. Those things are, you know, good and important, but it all needs to work well together. And I think they neglect structure, so they don't set themselves up or build the business structurally to be able to be viable over the long term. They sort of just, you know, they keep this thing to try and just cuff it and pull it together as much as possible, and then wonder why they make it more difficult for themselves.
Do you think things like culture and mindset have become buzzwords? And I think something you mentioned earlier is it's hard to know where to go for information. And there's so many people talking about mindset, leadership, culture. Do you see people tripping up and making mistakes in who they're listening to and how they're interpreting the different phrases and terms?
Yes. LinkedIn, oh God, it's so fascinating. I often, you know, I get, you know, my girlfriend and, you know, will tell me to step away, put the phone down, step away, because I just get angry when I see it. And there is so much out there, and it's the biggest the biggest thing that you see on there is what we call context-free solutions. So people give solutions and it sounds nice, but it's context-free. You know, it may work in whatever world that they were dreaming in, but in reality, in the context you're in, it doesn't necessarily mean it work. It doesn't mean it's rubbish, but context really matters. And I think where people see something good and oh yeah, that sounds really great, they're not then considering the context in which you're now going to place it in, and will it work there? And I think that's some of the biggest mistakes. Then what then happens, and in mature organisations, startups, they bring in essentially fads. And they bring in fads and more fads, and their organisation just oscillates between different things. And then there's no stability. No one really knows what they are, what they should be doing. And it just destabilises the whole thing, which then reduces value, creates more well-being issues and all those stress in the organisation, which doesn't need to be there.
I think that's really interesting. One of the things I wanted to do is go back to something you said at the beginning, is your brother's an accountant. And so you had a trusted advisor. Apart from the fact he was a family member, he's also a member of a professional body. Do you think if you hadn't had that person that you could speak to on day one, that the journey would have been much harder?
Oh yeah, definitely on that, and still now. I suppose I don't really have to worry about the financial side, because...
But it's not even the financial side, it's the fact he's a professional. He will have seen hundreds of businesses, and he will know people and so on, and he can say, well, might do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, just on the basis, not even as your brother, but just as someone who's probably seen a lot and done a lot.
Yeah, also, you know, I had my brother Gareth, he's awesome, he still is awesome, to this point, helps me out. But yeah, he had a lot of advice from his perspective and that. But what it highlighted to me later on was that when I was in there, when I was starting off, I didn't really have a network, because all my friends were still in the army, or not in business. And it took me a while to then start to reach out. And now I have a really good network of people that are in similar positions to me, some that are more mature than me, and I really value taking the time to meet up with them, have a coffee, and there's no sort of real meaning to the meetings. It's just, we're just going to rant, and we learn something. But there's also there, if I've got a problem, I'll reach out and go, have you ever come across this before? Yeah. Or have you got this? And I've got some really good ones. I'm off to London to see one of them tomorrow, Scott. He's really kind, such a great bloke who just says, you know, whenever he's in London and I'm around, come down and spend the day with him. I learned so much from him. Yeah.
But I suppose the point I'm making is, the lesson is, if you can find that trusted advisor early on, and it might be a family member who's got some experience in business, or the type of business, or somebody who's a family accountant or lawyer or whatever, it's worth reaching out to them.
Oh yeah, hugely. You know. It's always, you know, everyone's perspective is valid.
Yeah.
And you know, there's some stuff you may think, you know, disagree, but there's always something there that's good. I think it's, with anything, I think it's worth getting multiple perspectives to a problem.
Yeah. Because doing it on your own is very hard.
Oh, it's trust me, I've been there in my little office, sat there just looking and just not being able to comprehend or even absorb what I need to do next. And that becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
How did you build that network? Because you said you kind of didn't have it at the beginning, but obviously you've met these people who are able to share their experiences or help you out, and presumably you help them out as well. For founders in that position where maybe they're much younger and starting their first business and don't have that network, what would you advise? Because there is also so much in terms of events and networking, and as you said, you could spend all your time doing that kind of thing. So it's kind of how to invest your time wisely and where to start.
Yeah, I think if you're lucky to, you know, meet these people, you know, in person, that's good. But you know, LinkedIn does give that great opportunity. You beyond all the sort of the noise, there is some people that you may resonate. You see something they write and it's in a similar field, and you start to resonate and just reach out. And I think that's what I did reach out, ask for coffee, and you get to meet people. Some people rightly don't have time, and that's fine. That don't take offence to it. People are just busy, but just reach out, find these people, and I met loads of people that turned out to be not good people. But that's fine. Just sort of just move on. But until you start to meet someone, you think, wow, yeah, you're really good. You're someone I can actually trust. And I think that's the key thing. It's about you're someone I can trust. I can speak to you openly about stuff, and you'll one, keep that confidential. Two, you won't have any judgment with it.
Yeah, that's important.
And you mentioned about, I suppose, kind of rejection, where you're reaching out to people and some people just don't have time, they're too busy. Would you say that being able to handle and accept rejection as a business owner is an important trait? Yes.
Don't take it personal. I suffer that from massively taking it personal. And, still a bit me now, you in the consultancy world, you're always going out for work and people come to you and say, write a proposal. I hate writing proposals, anyway. But you write it and then you send it out and you get nothing back. And you're thinking, was it me? It's like being on the first date. It's like, was it me? It's something I said, and you start to doubt yourself. And I've really got to the point, just don't take it personal. It could be anything going on in the world. Just work on what you can control, and and learn from it what you can. Ideally, it'd be even better if someone got back to you and said, I'm busy, or like I said about the proposal, I didn't like this and this, because it helps you to orientate and learn quicker. But when you don't have that, and I think that's the hardest thing in a business, when you don't get that feedback, that's really hard, because then you don't really know, and it brings into self-doubt, where you just need to pause, break away, and then reflect on in the cold light of day, and just control what you can control, and then don't worry about the rest.
I had a situation recently where I wrote a proposal and I'd submitted it, and he called me to say, thanks for the proposal, I'm away for 2 weeks. Oh, by the way, we've asked somebody else to quote as well. This is after I'd written the proposal. I was thinking, would I have written a different proposal had I known there was somebody else involved? So that element of doubt is always there. It's quite hard to deal with at times.
It's not always a bad thing. I think it keeps you on your toes and keeps you learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that desire to want to do better and to learn more is a good thing. Like I always, people talk about imposter syndrome. I think we all have it. It's inherent. A lot of people have varying degrees, and it's not all bad, because it's that self-doubt sometimes that go, well, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to learn more. And then you take on more information, you learn something new, and you adapt and you become better. If I didn't have that, then I'd probably still be doing the same thing like I was 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing, but I much prefer what I have now.
Yeah. So what sort of qualities do you think you have that make you good at what you do, running your own business?
Got good hair. No, I think I think that one is that never, I just want to learn more. I absorb. I'm always, if I'm not with clients, I'm inherently passionate about what I do. So I'm always learning, stretching out, trying different things, and I think that really helps me, keep on top of my game. So when I'm actually dealing with clients, I'm really giving them best value. And the other part is I'm very direct,
Right.
Which works for some, works for some it doesn't, some it offends. But I think being direct and honest, I think that's what we need to do as consultants. Otherwise, you become native. You become blurred. Where I think that having that bit of neutrality you talked about earlier, being objective, and just being direct, I think that's really useful.
And presumably you're fairly resilient as well, given both your military background and you've been doing? I mean, you haven't fallen over at the first hurdle.
No, I'm like it's probably because I'm quite chubby. I'm like a bouncy ball. Bounce back up. That's my excuse for keeping a bit of winter coat around.
Yeah.
You've got to be, just generally in life anyway, because it's quite uncertain. There's always things that are going to happen that are unexpected, but especially so when you're running the business, because it's just when I actually set up, it wasn't that long, and then we went into lockdown. I was only just starting. I probably got out at the worst time, but yeah, came focused, adapted quickly. Luckily, I had a lot of projects ongoing, but it was thinking then, okay, then how can I still achieve what we need to achieve without being there with them? And then just quickly adapted, just bought new tools, went online, managed to get through it. And then as soon as we're out, it was a case of, well, okay, we're out now. What do I need to stop doing? And, what do I need to start doing differently now that it's emerging in a different context?
The mindset that you spoke about earlier about having that focus on the solution, but being open to different ways of getting there, that must have really helped you in COVID. Did you notice other companies or clients who struggled with that? Because, of course, you can't do things the way you always have once the country goes into lockdown, and it's a completely new experience.
Yes, I saw it in varying degrees. I saw some that just thought, well, you know what, there's an easy option. The government's going to give me money, so I'm just going to just chill out, and that works for them. That's fine. But it didn't really show resilient organisation. And there's some that took a bit of time. I think it was almost as if they were waiting for it to just be as it should be, instead of thinking, well, it's happened now. Let's move on. It was almost as if they were waiting in paralysis, thinking, you know what, we'll give it a couple of months and it'll just all sort of be okay. But that paralysis, that made it more worse because they have to play catch up all the time. But yeah, I definitely saw it in varying degrees in businesses. Some that just didn't have a fight, some just completely like rabbit in headlights, and then some that, there's loads of examples of people that, even just diversified outside of what their actual business was, which I thought was really good. They quickly saw opportunities and went for it.
And for smaller businesses and startups in particular, do you think that ability to act quickly or see different opportunities is important in their survival?
Yes. We always talk about viable organisations. That's why I help create viable organisations, ones that can, understand, how to achieve fit in the external environment, and then, adapt over time to do it. And you've got to, fundamentally, a lot of the times, what you do doesn't change. It's how you do it that adapts. Unless something fundamentally changes, but it's how you do it. And I think it's that ability to realise that, constantly observing the external environment and starting to understand the changes early enough, because I think that gives you chance. See it early enough, you can then observe, orientate to what the changes are, and then you can start making decisive decisions about how to adapt sooner, rather than when you're faced with the impending doom. It makes it a lot harder for yourself.
Given the range of companies and organisations you've worked with, what are the most common fundamental errors that they're making that you see?
There's quite a few. The one is the outside and future. It astounds me that the amount of organisations that spend very little or no time looking at anything that's remotely outside the organisation future, and they're blind to it, and they're using a model of an external environment that doesn't exist. So then they wonder why they're surprised when they get hit by something, and then all that means then is that they've got to do rapid transformation across their organisation, and their organisation can't do it. They can't change in time, and it just fractures the organisation. So that's key one. It's that, and I even see it. I monitor a lot of teams, and it's rare to find an organisation that spends more than an hour, a month talking or even looking at anything external. And then they wonder why they're just constantly in oscillation.
So does it become kind of like an echo chamber?
Yeah.
Right.
We talk about, models, especially leadership, and how you are and big in the organization is. The model that you're using to make decisions is fundamental. But the thing is, they're so disconnected. The model they're using isn't representative of either the external environment or the organization itself. So they're making decisions based on capabilities or context that doesn't exist. And they then wonder why then there's a disconnect, and their employees or organizations are cynical. So going, well, why are we doing that? That didn't make sense. How do you expect us to do that? We haven't got the resources to do that. It's because they're disconnected. They need to ensure that, one, they're looking externally and they're making, accurate model, understanding the risks, understanding the early warning signs for change, what's actually happening in the external environment, good. And then also one is, getting out of the boardroom and doing sporadic, unannounced, several layers down, not there to criticize, just there to learn. So that when they go back to make decisions, their decisions are more congruent with what's actually happening in reality.
Yeah, that probably applies to politicians as well, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, hugely, yeah, hugely.
But we won't talk about it.
I know, yeah. And another key one as well is control and autonomy. A huge one. I said earlier about you need some level of coherence and governance and cohesion, but you need to apply autonomy. What I see a lot is that they don't. There's too much control, which means then that the employees, the teams, have no freedom of action to adapt to the changes that are happening.
Yeah.
And they have to then wait. But by the time they're waiting for their decision to come back down, the context change again, and they're just constantly in this limbo of inaction.
Yeah, that must be tough.
Do you see any of this more in large companies compared to small companies? Because when you were talking, I was thinking about sometimes the disconnects between maybe directors and clients, because you said earlier you spend a lot of time with clients. I know for some businesses that's not the case for directors, that they really have quite almost no relationship with clients. What issues does that cause, and do you see it more in large companies or small companies?
Similar, but I see it manifest in different ways. So large companies, again, pretty much like I was talking about, they'll make decisions on what they think's best, but it's based on an outdated model, and the things change, and they're not, the people that are doing the value, they understand the customers. So you need to trust them more to have the freedom to adapt. So you're keeping that value strong. In smaller businesses, I find it's more, what's the best way to put it? I find it more that it depends the will and strength of the owner, because it comes more owner led, and it depends how open they are to different perspectives. But I find some aren't, and then thus they have a view of the world that's completely different to everybody else, and they're not willing to listen to anything else, which causes issues. And the other thing as well is that I found in smaller businesses, they've got some of those long-standing clients that were their friends, and they helped them out from the start, and they tend to just listen to them and not listen to the new ones that come in. And that's what caused a lot of friction as well.
That's actually a really interesting point, isn't it? Because when you do start off, your first clients, you treat almost like family members. And I think that's a really valid point, because the new clients, in a way, are much more important.
Yeah, and they're going to give you probably more honest feedback.
Yeah.
And it's changing as well. So they're new for a reason. There's something's happening, or and the product, the service is adapting, but they need to know why it's adapting and what it's being used for.
Yeah, I think that's really important learning.
Yeah, I was very black and white. You either know your clients or you don't.
Yeah,
But there's more to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. Oh. No, it's been very interesting, really interesting.
Thank you. So we have a tradition where the last guest asks a question to ask to the next guest. So the question our last guest asked was, how do you encourage your team to bring the same level of energy and motivation to work every day, so consistently?
Or I think there's a thing that's often talked about but misunderstood, which we talk about initiative. And everyone will go, "Oh, I wish they'd take the initiative." But it's hard to take the initiative if they don't know what the wider context is. So a bit what I was talking about earlier, we wanted to bring the motivation in is autonomy matters. Really does, that freedom of action. So being very clear about the what you want them to do, but more importantly, in order to achieve what. Now, the in order to is really crucial, because you go, I need you to achieve this in order for us to do this. And if the more that they understand the wider aspect, then when they're faced with options and they can see it and go, well, I could do that, but actually this would be really useful, because if I could do that, that would really help that. And it helps initiative and it builds that in. And I think when they get that initiative and have that freedom of action, that really builds their motivation to want to do more and, do it better each time. So I think that unlocking that ability to have initiative, I think, is really key.
Thank you.
And the second part then is you need to set a question for our next guest.
Oh, God. Could I ask the next guest? Don't even know who your next guest is.
Oh, I can't tell you.
Yeah,
That'd be business owner.
Yeah,
business
owners.
But they're business owners, yes.
Probably, how do you, if you were mentoring a new business owner, how would you encourage them to look outside, not just inside?
I like that. That's really good.
Thank
And that
you.
goes back to your point. Thank you very much, Mike. Really appreciate it. It's been really good conversation.
Oh no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.